Hello everyone, we will talk about selection today. Selection is about making a decision in your program, and based on that decision, you take a different path of execution. So you can have multiple paths of executions, and that can be done by using the selection in Python or in any other language. And decisions are based on truth values or Boolean values, and in Python you have two types of uh, truth values, and that is true and false. And then literally you can type in your program true and false, and that represents these two Boolean values. So for example, if you print true, that will just print, that's a literal value, and it prints true. And if you look at the type of that literal value, and that is a Boolean type of value, so or truth value. But for example, if you look at the type of true, in this case, this last example, because of the quotations around true, that is a string value. So therefore, the type of this literal is a string. In Python, as well as in any other language, Boolean expressions basically are usually comparison expressions, and they evaluate to a truth value, a Boolean value, true or false, and then you can use that expression, as I said, to make a decision. So here you see an example of a comparison. You compare 5 to 6, whether they are equal. By the way, here equal sign twice represents a comparison operator, and this is false. So then when you print it, it prints false. But if you compare 5 to 5, and they are equal, so it is a value of true, evaluates to true. You have multiple comparison operators, just like in any other programming language, and these are less than, equal to with two equal signs, greater than equal to, greater than, and not equal. And on the right hand side you see some examples in Python specific expressions. For example, this last one is comparing a secret key variable, its value, whether it is not equal to ABC123, which is a string. So basically it expects that the secret key is a string variable and has some string inside, and then this expression compares these two basically values, the value in secret key versus this literal value ABC123, and if they are equal, meaning that they have the same number of characters and in the same order, then this will be false actually, because we are looking for not equal to, so they should be different. In that case it will be true. And then you can combine multiple comparison operators to make a what do you call that, a combined logical expression or comparison. And here are the three operators you can use to combine multiple expressions, Boolean expressions. Those are and, or, and not. And you see some examples of usage here. For example, the variable is assigned, x is variable, the x variable is assigned the value 5, and then you check whether x is greater than 0, which is true, and x is less than 5, less than 10, which is also true. So these two comparisons are true, and the and basically combining these with and will be true as well, so that prints true. And here the variable n is assigned 25, and then you compare, you have another expression here, a combined expression, a Boolean expression, and here it checks whether n is divisible by 2. Basically n modulus arithmetic percent 2 gives you 0 in case if it is divisible by 2, right? And if it is true, then the OR case and the next comparison says whether it is divisible by 3 as well. So if n is divisible by 2 and 3 both, or not, this is an OR case by the way, so only one of them should be true, either divisible by 2 or divisible by 3 or both. In those 3 cases it will be true, otherwise it will be false. So in the case of 25, it is not divisible by 2 and not divisible by 3, so therefore this will be false. And the next case is you have a not operator on a comparison. So n is less than 25, which is false, and because n is 25, so it is not less than 25, but it is equal to 25. So not that will be true then, right? So n less than 25 is false, so not of that will be true. And here you have a simple expression like not true, that is false. And when you have multiple operators, we talked about these for numerical expressions or arithmetic expressions, we have a precedence of arithmetic operators. Just like that, we also have a precedence of logical operators, and they combine with, of course, with the other operators. And then you see that the logical operators have a lower precedence comparing to the others. But they also have an order among themselves. So not comes first, it has a higher precedence, and then comes and then or. So if you see multiple of these operators in the same expression, so first the not will be applied, and then the and operator, and then the or operator. But before that, you will have the arithmetic expressions basically working first, and then the comparisons, and then comes the logical operators. So here's an example of a if statement in Python. So basically, if statement is where the decision is made based on some logical expression or Boolean expression. So here x is assigned 15, and then we have a comparison if statement. If the variable x is divisible by 2, so divide by 2 is equal to 0, then the remaining is 0. So then in that case, this will say execute the next statement after the if statement, and then it will say print x is even. If it is false, the if statement is false, then it will go to else case. So this is an if statement with an else part. So in the case the if condition is false, it will go to the else case, and then apply the methods or execute the statements after the else clause. So in this case, it will print x is out. And then after the if statement, you have next comes the print statement. Then it will print all done after that. So on the right hand side, you see the flow chart of this execution. So first the assignment 15 to x is executed, and then you have an if statement after that. It has a comparison whether x is divisible by 2. If yes, it will go to the left hand side route, right? And then it will print x is even. If not, if it is false, then it will go to the right hand side and then execute this one statement, print statement, x is odd. And whether it executes the left hand side or the right hand side, then it will then go to the next statement after if statement, if else statement, and it will print this. So this is what we call a conditional execution, and in this example it will execute the else part because x is 15 and it is not divisible by 2, so then it will print x is odd, and then it will print all done after the if statement. So this if statement has two parts, if and else. So it will either execute the first print statement or the next one, but not both. So it is based on the condition x is divisible by 2, and then following that it will execute one of those. So here it's the general syntax for the if statements in Python. So you have if followed by some condition. It could be just one comparison, or it could be multiple comparisons put together with logical operators and or not. And after the condition, you should have a colon, and it is followed by one or more statements, and those should be indented. So indentation is very important in Python. So all the statements that belong to the if condition being true will be in the same line, in the same column, but they should be indented inside. And then the else case should be right under if, and then if the condition is false, it will go to the else part, and it should be followed by a colon again, and the statements will be indented inside, and you can have one or more statements under else. And on the right hand side at the top corner you see the flow chart of that. So the condition is true. If it is true, it goes to the right hand side in this case. So it doesn't matter right or left. So basically true follows to the right, and then the false goes to the left in this case, and you have statements basically based on that condition. Conditions, usually we use a diamond shape to represent that that's a condition, but in this case the book had a different presentation, so that I follow that, but you should use diamond shape. That's more acceptable. So we have seen if and else parts, but you don't have to have else parts. That else is optional. So you can have a condition and then followed by some number of statements, and those are executed only if the condition is true. Otherwise it will skip those statements and go to the next one. In this case you have a print. So this is called a unary selection. So you have a condition followed by a number of statements, and those statements execute only if the condition is true. And you can have one or more statements in the if case. In this case you have only one. So x is assigned 10, and if x is less than 10, which is false in this case, it will go and print the next print statement. This is always printed, but the print statement inside the if, which is indented, is not executed because the condition is false. If x is less than 0 is false. And you can have if statements inside if statements, and it is called nested conditionals. So just like any other statement inside an if statement or the else part, you can have if conditions inside those statements, among those statements. So here you see a nested if statement under else for the first if statement. So x is assigned 10 and y is assigned 10. So you have these two variables. And if x is less than, the first if statement says, if x is less than 10, which is false, then it will go to the else case, right? So because both of them have the value 10, so they are equal, so x is not less than y, so it is false. So it goes to the else part, and then the first statement is an if statement again, with an else. So it will check if x is greater than y, the next if statement, and it is also false. So in that case it will go to the else part, and then follow the statement after that and print x and y must be equal. So this is a nested if statement, and on the right hand side you see how the flow chart is showing these two if statements. One is inside the other. It is inside the else part of the first if statement. So in this case x is less than y, the first if condition is false, so it goes to the left, and then x is greater than y condition is also false, so it goes to the left hand side again, and then it will execute this part, which is this last if statement, this print statement. And then this program basically prints this one in the output. you can have also what is called a chained conditional. So you can have multiple conditions inside an if, and those are structured as the first statement will be if, followed by an else if, which is represented with elif, elif, and then you can have multiple else ifs, and then at the end you can have an else as well, and each one of them should end with a colon, don't forget that. In this example, we first check if x is less than y, and if that's the case, it will print this, print x is less than y. If false, then it will go to the next condition, else if, and then compare x is greater than y. If that's the case, then it will print this one. Otherwise, if both of them are false, it will go to the else, no matter what, and then it will print this one. And on the right hand side you see a flow chart of that, and so you have these conditions, basically diamond shapes. Here we talk about the Boolean functions. So earlier we have seen functions and that can return values. They can return any type of value, so therefore you can have functions returning Boolean values, and those are called Boolean functions. So basically a function that returns a truth value, true or false, is called a Boolean function. So when you call the function, it returns back either true or false value. So here you have an example of a function called is divisible. So the def statement at the beginning says that this is a function definition. It has two parameters, x and y, and then ends with a colon at the end of that statement. So and then the statement inside the function should be indented, don't forget that. And the indented statement says that there's only one if statement, and then there's a return statement at the end. So the if statement with an else, it checks whether x is, when divided by y, the remainder is 0. If that's the case, x is divisible by y, and then it will assign true value to result variable. Else, if the condition is false, the first condition, then it will assign false to the result variable, and at the end it will return that result, which is a truth value, either true or false. And then the statement that is calling that function, so in this case you have a print statement, inside you call the function is divisible with two values, 10 and 5, and 10 is divisible by 5, so it will return true, and then it will print that value on the screen. So that's how you can write Boolean functions. So the Boolean function at some point should return a value which is true or false. So you can return only two types of values, either true or false. And the statements, the program that is calling that function should expect back that there's a truth value coming. So you can use it anywhere. You can write actually an if statement. If is divisible, let's say 9, 3, and then colon, that will return true, of course. And then you can say print yes, divisible. All right, let's look at an example of this, an exercise. Here, your program basically takes two input, number of hours somebody works, let's say 45 hours, and the rate per hour, which is $10, and then it prints out the payment for that person. But here there's a condition. If the work hours are greater than 40, then you pay 1.5 times more per hour. So in this case, in this example, you pay $15 per hour after 40 hours. So the first 40 hours you pay $10 per hour, and then the remaining 5 hours will be paid by $15, 1.5 times more, and the total will be 475. So that's how you make the calculation, right? First 40 hours is $10, and the remaining 5 hours will be $15, and the total will be 475. So how would you program that? So here's the solution. You first need to read those two input values, right? The number of hours and the rate per hour. And you have to convert them to numeric values. Don't forget that the input function always returns a string. So after reading that string from the user, you have to convert into a number, either using an int function, right? Or the float function. So here we expect that fractional values could come, so therefore we use the float functions, and then convert them and then save it into hours and then rate variables. Now here is your selection decision. If hours is greater than 40, then you make this calculation, which is $40 40 hours. The first 40 hours will be by the rate, and the remaining hours will be from 1.5 times more of the rate. But what if the person works more than 80 hours? So this solution is actually doesn't work. So you have to make a little bit more a different calculation here. But anyway, this works for up to 80 hours, and you don't expect person to work more than 80 hours. So, and if the condition is true, you make this calculation for the pay variable. If false, meaning that the number of hours is less than 40 or equal to 40, and then you make this calculation, hours times rate, that will be your pay, and then you print. All right, this works. And the next exercise is turn that calculation into a function. Make your payment calculation using a function, and it should be called compute pay with two parameters, hours and rate, and it should work the same way. And here is the solution for that. So we have a function definition at the beginning, a compute pay function with two parameters, and that solution we have written, the selection part is here. But in this case, it doesn't apply or save it into a pay, but return it. So the function return the calculated pay value. Either if it is greater than 40, it will use the first calculation and then return it. Otherwise, else it will use this simple calculation, hours times rate, and then return it. And the program where we are using it is here. First, we read the number of hours and number of the rate per hours, and then save them into these two variables as numeric values, and then call the function here in the print statement. So we call the function with hours and rate, which comes from these two variables, and then the return value will be one of these, right, depending on what we entered as the number of hours, and then it will be printed with the pay. So we'll get the same output just like here. Alright, that's about it for today's lecture, and you should do your exercise in the textbook at the end of the chapter, and we will see you in the next lecture.